All right, so I want you to imagine something for a second. Picture you're the CEO of a major financial institution,
Uh-huh.
but you're not operating in some stable, predictable market. Not where your biggest worry is, I don't know, a quarter point shift in interest rates.
Right, not an easy ride.
No. You're operating in an economy that is, well, it's effectively on fire. You've got triple-digit inflation, which means the cash in your vault is losing value by the hour.
Mm.
You've got a historic drought that's wiped out your country's main export engine. And, just to top it all off, there's massive geopolitical tension-wrecking supply chains everywhere.
It sounds like an absolute nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, most CEOs in that spot would be, looking for the nearest exit.
Locking the doors.
Exactly, cutting costs to the bone and just hiding under the desk until it all blows over.
You'd think so. That's the rational survivalist thing to do. But the company we're deep diving into today, they didn't hide. They looked at that absolute chaos in 2023 and decided, you know what? This looks like a great time to go shopping.
And not just window shopping. They made one of the largest acquisitions in their history.
Exactly. We're looking at a major financial player in a volatile Latin American market, Argentina specifically. And what makes this deep dive so fascinating is that by the end of 2023, this company wasn't just acting like a bank.
How's that go?
It was trying to be a traditional lender, a high-speed fintech, and this is the part that really blew my mind, an agricultural grain broker, all at the same time.
It's a massive pivot. We've pulled apart their 2023 annual report, and honestly, it reads less like a banking review and more like a case study in, well, extreme crisis management. We're going to try and figure out how a legacy institution navigates that kind of turbulence.
I mean, they balance this huge operational expansion with a 17% drop in their core business private sector lending. That's a paradox right there. So, okay, set the scene for us. Where do we even start unpacking a year like 2023?
We have to start with the macro context, or really none of this strategy makes any sense. The report paints a pretty vivid picture of a world in flux. So globally, you had the war in Ukraine, conflict in the Middle East, all disrupting everything. But the report highlights this specific trend called nearshoring.
Nearshoring. We hear that term a lot. That's basically companies moving production from China to places like Mexico to be closer to Western markets. Right?
Precisely. It's a reshuffling of the global deck.
Yeah.
But while that was happening internationally, the local situation was, well, intense is an understatement. The report really emphasizes a historic drought.
And we're not talking about just a few dry months here.
No, this was a catastrophe.
I saw they even cited NASA data saying 2023 was the hottest year on record.
They did. And in this market, agriculture isn't just a sector, it's the engine of the entire economy. It provides the hard currency the country needs to function. So when the rains didn't come, that engine just stalled. It crushed the agricultural sector. You combine that with falling real wages and a major political transition, and you have a perfect storm.
And yet, when I looked at the financial headline numbers in the report, my jaw just dropped. The net result for the year was roughly $587 billion.
Yeah.
That sounds like an astronomical amount of money.
It is a huge number, but we have to be incredibly careful with these nominal numbers in a high inflation economy. It's like looking at yourself in a funhouse mirror.
Everything gets distorted.
Exactly. Everything looks bigger than it actually is. The report does note that that is adjusted for inflation, but the real story, the actual health of the business, is hidden in the lending data. Loans to the private sector dropped by 17%.
Okay, that feels like a massive red flag. If you're a bank, isn't lending your entire reason for existing? If you're not lending, what are you even doing?
That is the million-dollar question. In a stable economy, yes, lending is the job. But in this environment, the demand for credit just evaporated. When interest rates are in the stratosphere and uncertainty is everywhere, businesses don't borrow to build new factories.
And farmers aren't borrowing to buy tractors.
Exactly, because they don't have a crop.
So the customers just stop showing up.
To an extent. But here's the nuance, and it's an important one. While their lending dropped 17%, the system average dropped 20%.
Ah, so they still outperformed the market.
Strictly speaking, yes. They shrank, but they shrank less than their competitors.
So they're grading on a curve. We lost money, but we lost less than the guy across the street.
In a crisis, that counts as a win. But there's another stat that really exposes just how difficult the year was. Their interest income, so the money they make from loans, that went up 28%.
Which sounds great, right? Double-digit growth.
It sounds great. But their interest expenses, the money they have to pay out to depositors, skyrocketed by 70%.
Ouch. That is a painful gap.
That's the inflation squeeze right there. The cost of holding money, of keeping depositors happy so they don't pull their cash, went up so much faster than the money they could make on new loans. And as a result, the net result from interest actually fell by 13%.
So the core engine taking deposits and making loans was just sputtering.
Completely under pressure. They managed to stay profitable through other means, which I'm sure we'll get to, but that traditional banking model was effectively broken by the macro environment.
And despite all that, the lending drop, the expense spike, they proposed paying out dividends of $460 per share. That feels like a flex.
It's a massive flex. It's a signal.
A signal to who?
To the shareholders. It says, don't panic. We have the cash. We are solvent. It speaks to their defensive strategy. When you can't lend aggressively, you have to focus on solvency and liquidity. The report shows they maintain very high liquidity coverage just to weather this storm.
Okay, so that establishes the battlefield. You've got the drought and inflation as challenge number one. Demand for credit vanished because the farmers, their key clients, didn't have a crop to finance. But the report mentions a second challenge, one that sounds a bit more buzzword heavy. The Fidgetal Dilemma.
Fidgetal. It does sound like a bad sci-fi movie title, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
But I assume it's actually important.
Oh, it's crucial. It's about the tension between physical branches and digital banking. It's the headache every legacy bank is facing right now. Customers want the speed of a fintech app. Pay with a QR code, transfer money instantly, zero friction. But when they have a problem or a complex transaction.
They want to scream at a human being.
Exactly. They want to walk into a branch and have someone fix it. So the company has to maintain this really expensive physical network while also building a world-class digital platform.
So how did they handle that? I mean, the ruthlessly efficient move would just be to shut down branches to save money, right?
That's what many banks do. But this institution took a different route. They implemented what they call a mixed attention model. So instead of closing branches, they digitize the processes inside them.
So they're trying to bridge the gap.
They are, and they claim this new relationship model worked. They cite a Net Promoter Score, an NPS of 47 for individual customers.
Okay, for our listeners who aren't marketing nerds, an NPS of 47 for a bank, is that good? I feel like people usually only rate their bank when they're angry.
For a utility or a bank, 47 is actually quite impressive. It suggests that this hybrid model isn't just confusing people, which is a real risk, it's actually satisfying them. But this digital pivot created the third major challenge, which was talent.
Right, you can't run a digital bank if your staff only knows how to stamp paper forms and count cash.
Exactly. They had thousands of employees in operational roles, like cashiers. And in a digital-first world, you simply don't need as many cashiers.
So this is usually the part of the story where we talk about mass layoffs.
Surprisingly, no. And this is really interesting from a management perspective. They launched a program called Desafia Tu Role, which translates to challenge your role.
Challenge your role, I like it.
Yeah. They took operational staff and actually retrained them for commercial and digital roles. The report says over 370 people were promoted internally based on this reskilling.
That's actually a really smart way to retain that institutional knowledge. Instead of firing the person who knows how the bank works and hiring a 22-year-old who knows code but nothing about banking, you just upgrade the existing employee.
It builds loyalty, too.
Yeah.
It turns a potential labor dispute into a career opportunity.
Okay, so they're navigating the drought, they're rewiring their branches, and they're retraining their staff. That's a full plate. But this is where the story gets wild. Because despite all that defense, they went on the offense. Let's talk about the key events. They went shopping.
This is where the strategy shifts from survive to conquer. In a year of absolute crisis, they acquired the local subsidiary of a massive international bank, the one formerly known as Banco Argentina.
I remember seeing the headlines about this. It was huge. But help me understand the logic. If the market is shrinking and lending is down 17%, why buy a competitor? Why buy more of a shrinking market?
It's about scale, but also about the specific portfolio. By buying this unit, which they've now rebranded as BMA, they acquired a huge roster of corporate clients. International banks often have very strong relationships with the large multinational companies operating in the country.
So they bought the VIP list.
Basically, yes. And it was a classic counter-cyclical play. A big global player was looking to exit the market because of the volatility. This company said, we know this volatility, we live in it, we'll take it. It just solidifies their position as a heavyweight.
The classic be greedy when others are fearful strategy. But there was another acquisition that I found even more surprising. They didn't just buy a bank. They bought a company called Comercio Interior, which is now Macro Agro.
And this is fascinating. It's highly unusual for a traditional bank. This isn't a lending institution. It's a grain broker.
Wait, walk me through this. The bank is now brokering cereal, like actual corn and soy.
Yes, this is vertical integration. So typically, a bank lends money to a farmer to buy seeds. The farmer grows the crop, sells it, and then pays back the loan with interest.
Right. Standard banking 101.
But by owning a grain broker, they are now sitting right in the middle of the agricultural value chain. They can actually broker the sale of the grain itself.
Why would a bank want to do that? Isn't that a totally different business?
It is, but think about the context. In this economy, grain is basically a store of value. It's almost a currency in itself. By brokering the grain, they capture value from the transaction itself, not just from the interest rate on a loan. It allows them to get closer to where the real wealth is being generated in the country.
That is a bold move. It turns them into a partner in the business, not just some financier on the sidelines.
It also gives them incredible data. If you know exactly what farmers are selling and when, your risk assessment for your lending business becomes much, much sharper.
That makes a lot of sense. Information is power. And then, to cap off this year of expansion, they launched a massive branding campaign.
The Think Big campaign.
Yeah.
And they chose the perfect ambassador, Lionel Scaloni, the coach of the national football team that won the World Cup.
Smart. In a depressed economic climate, you align yourself with the one thing that made everybody happy.
It was more than just happiness. It was about federalism, this idea of being nationwide. The team represents the whole country, from the big cities to the smallest villages. And this bank tries to position itself as the federal bank, with a presence in the provinces where other private banks might not go.
So while the international banks sit in the capital city, these guys are out in the interior, in the agricultural heartland.
Exactly, and Scaloni reinforces that identity perfectly. It was a very calculated emotional connection during a really tough year.
Okay, let's pivot to ESG, environmental, social, and governance. I have to be honest, a lot of times this section of an annual report feels like fluff. It's usually just pictures of people planting trees and some vague promises.
I agree.
But there were some hard numbers here that caught my eye.
I agree. Usually it's a lot of corporate speak.
Yeah.
But here, the environmental side actually had some teeth. They aren't just buying carbon credits to offset their guilt. They reach 17.81% renewable energy consumption across their own operation.
That's decent.
It is. And they cut gas oil consumption for their generators by 22.8%.
That generator stat is oddly specific. What does that tell you?
It implies operational efficiency. In a country with energy grid issues, businesses rely heavily on diesel backup generators. Cutting that consumption means they either invested in better hardware or, more likely, they really optimized their own energy usage.
And what about beyond their own footprint?
This is the bigger impact. They organized green bonds for third parties totaling $171 million.
Can you explain green bonds for the listener real quick?
Sure. A green bond is basically a loan designed specifically to support climate-related or environmental projects. So the company acts as the intermediary to raise capital for, say, a wind farm or a solar park.
So they're a facilitator.
Exactly. They're facilitating the transition for the rest of the economy, not just changing their own light bulbs.
That's a multiplier effect. Okay, what about the social side?
I saw something called Cuentas Sanas, which is healthy accounts.
Sounds like a diet plan for your wallet.
In a way, it is. It's their financial education program. It's a portal with nearly 67,000 users, and they delivered workshops to over 100,000 beneficiaries.
But is this just marketing? You know, come learn about money so you can open an account with us.
It certainly helps with customer acquisition, but in an economy with triple-digit inflation, financial literacy is a survival skill. Teaching people how to manage money when prices change daily, or how to save when the currency devalues. That is a genuine social service.
That's a fair point. If you don't understand inflation, you get crushed by it. And on governance.
Two things stood out to me. First, board independence. 5 out of their directors are independent. That's a strong ratio for this market, where often boards are packed with insiders.
And the second point.
Their anti-corruption and transparency policies. The report explicitly states these don't just apply to government contracts, of which they have many, but are extended to private sector transactions as well.
Why is that distinction important?
Because usually anti-corruption rules are strict for public money, but, a bit looser for private deals. By applying the same standard across the board, they're trying to de-risk their entire portfolio.
Hmm.
It's a governance shield.
Okay, so we've looked back at 2023. It was a roller coaster. Now, looking forward, the report lays out priorities for the next year. What's the game plan for this new, larger grain brokering entity?
Well, priority one is obvious, integration. They just bought a massive bank, the BMA entity, and now they have to merge the teams, the systems, the cultures. I call it one team.
And mergers are where good strategies go to die. It's
Yeah.
notoriously difficult to execute.
It's a huge energy sink. You have two IT systems, two HR departments, two ways of doing everything. Getting that to run smoothly is going to consume a lot of their bandwidth.
And what about the tech side? We talked about Phygital, but are they doing anything new?
This is where they're trying to be more than just a bank for individuals. They're betting big on what they call the GovTech revolution.
GovTech, so technology for the government.
Yes. They want to be the digital backbone for provinces and municipalities. We're talking digital parking systems, tax collection portals, citizen profiles. They want to be the tech partner that helps the public sector digitize.
That sounds incredibly sticky.
That's the word. If you run the tax portal for a city, that city is probably going to bank with you for a very long time. It creates a moat around their public sector business.
It deepens that federal presence we talked about. If you are the operating system for the local government, you aren't going anywhere.
Exactly. And finally, the third priority is the payment ecosystem. They're competing directly with the fintechs. They have a platform called Modio with 1.7 million users.
This is the battle for the wallet.
It is. They want to aggressively grow their share of digital transactions, QR codes, digital wallets. They are terrified of becoming just a pipe while some tech company owns the actual customer relationship. They don't want to lose that transactional layer.
So pulling this all together, it feels like 2023 was a year of paradoxes.
It really was. If we summarize the three main pillars of this deep dive, number one is countercyclical aggression. Most companies would shrink during a drought and recession. This company bought a competitor and a grain broker.
Number two is the super app strategy. They are not staying in their lane. They're doing GovTech, they're doing agricultural brokerage, and they're fighting for digital payments.
And number three is simply resilience. Despite a 70% jump in interest expenses, which is a terrifying number for any CFO, they managed to maintain high liquidity and even pay dividends.
It's impressive, but here's where it gets really interesting for me. When you see a bank becoming a grain broker and a government software provider, is that genius or is it an identity crisis?
That is the big question, isn't it? By diversifying so aggressively, they're protecting themselves from the volatility of pure banking. If lending dries up like it did in 2023, well, maybe grain brokerage makes money. If interest rates crash, maybe those sticky GovTech contracts provide stability.
It's almost like they're building a hedge fund with a bank attached to it.
In a way, yes, but it introduces so much complexity. Managing a bank is hard. Managing a tech company is hard. Managing a commodity brokerage is hard. Doing all three under one roof in a volatile economy, that is a high-wire act.
They're betting that their think big culture can handle it.
They are. And if 2023 was the stress test, they seem to have passed it. But the integration of that massive acquisition, that's going to be the real proof of the pudding in the coming year.
Well, if the strategy is sound on paper, execution is everything. I think I need to check my own financial health after hearing those inflation numbers. It's a good reminder that stability is a luxury, not a guarantee.
It certainly is. And it shows that in business, sometimes the best defense is a very, very surprising offense.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's a wrap for this deep dive into corporate strategy in the face of chaos. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.